Welcome to the Inquisitive Wren podcast. I'm Sha, your host. Join us as we explore diverse perspectives on the human experience, offering insightful interviews and deep reflections on philosophy, spirituality, psychology, from a bird's eye view on the essence of being. Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Inquisitive Wren podcast with me, Sha, your host. On the show today is the wonderful Candice Ramsey, who is a certified professional coach. She's a mental health clinician and an Army veteran with nearly 30 years of experience in leadership development and organizational strategy. Candice is the founder of Mahogany Coach and Consulting LLC, and she helps people, individuals and leaders, to break free from self-limiting patterns and to help them turn self-awareness into what she calls their power. On this channel, we're all about self-awareness and addressing limiting belief patterns, limiting beliefs in your thoughts, and which transpire into action. So Candice combines certifications in Enneagram, Myers-Briggs, and emotional intelligence with her expertise in coaching and facilitation, and this all helps her to guide her clients toward personal and professional transformation, which is huge when you're going through life, going through work, and also for personal development. Having coached hundreds of leaders, her mission is to help others embrace their unique strengths because they're very different in everyone. Everyone won't have the same strengths, and she helps them to cultivate self-mastery and live their most authentic lives and selves. It takes courage to open up and embrace what you may think you are, who you may think you are. But it's very courageous as well to allow someone else who really doesn't know you to get to know you on a professional level with no other vested interest except to help you. It takes courage to allow that person in, and this is who and what Candice is. You will see throughout our interview her compassion and her passion for her work, but also for the human experience and the human being. She's a very spiritual lady as well, which, on this show, we talk a lot about. It helps to have that holistic view, I believe, in your overall recovery from whatever it is. It could be people-pleasing. It could be taking less than what you should have. It could be just having the strength, the knowledge, the wherewithal, and the intelligence, the emotional intelligence to help propel yourself forward. And Candice also supports all mental health advocacy initiatives. She embraces advocacy, which, as you know, is one of my passions. I am a trained and qualified advocate. And in Candice's work, she's able to help people to facilitate that transition between feeling as though you're helpless or feeling as though you have no courage to address those issues, to feeling that inner strength, that inner confidence and inner knowledge, which will help you to move forward. And so I'm really pleased to have her on the show today. Welcome, Candice Ramsey. Here's the interview.
Candice, thank you so much for joining me today. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
I've got so many questions for you. You've had a really interesting career trajectory. So I want to delve into a little bit about that because a lot of our listeners are trying to work out their next step in their careers. And some people think that once they train in something, that's it for the rest of their lives. But I think you're a good example of life brings things and then it changes. So tell us a little bit about how you became a coach. What led you to where you are now?
Yeah, that's such a interesting question. I tell people all the time, if I am a master at nothing, I am a master at reinventing myself. And so as a young adult, teenager, I really had no idea what I wanted to do. There were societal expectations, like families say, yeah, if you want to make good money, you be a doctor, a lawyer, a financial services professional, all of those things. And nothing really piqued my interest. And so I come from a military background. My father was in the U.S. Marine Corps. My older brother was in the U.S. Army. I had aunts that was in the military. I had an aunt that was in the U.S. Navy. And so, military was always a good option while I tried to figure things out. And so I enlisted in the U.S. Army, spent close to 2 decades there, had a family, kids, got married, all of the things. And then when I left the service, I went into doing finance. That's what I got my college degree in. That's kind of what I did in the military. As I was doing finance, I realized it's fun, but it's not exciting. I wanted to do something different. I went into consulting, which was a little bit more exciting. I was able to work with people and do projects and change what I was doing a little bit. But it still didn't feel like home to me. We'll talk a little bit more about this, but I'm all about the feeling and being in the right place, in the right space. And it was just not home for me. And then I always had this interest in psychology. Ever since I was even in high school, I had an interest in psychology. And so as an adult, I was past the age of 40, actually. And I state that because it's very important. I know a lot of women I work with, they tend to say that they can't reinvent themselves after the age of 40. So beyond the age of 40, I went back to school and I got a second bachelor's and a second master's in psychology, and I became a clinical mental health professional. And I started doing that. I actually really liked it. I was put on this earth that's, God's gift to me, is to be able to help people. But it's a little bit different than coaching. And I was coaching when I was in my corporate career. And I found that coaching is kind of home for me. It feels really good to be able to help people in the way that I help them. It doesn't have, kind of the state requirements. I can only help people as a therapist in the state where I'm licensed at. Whereas coaching, I can spread my message a little bit more broadly and help people a little bit more broadly. And so I went through quite a journey to get to where I am right now. But I don't regret any of it. I feel like each and every career step that I took led me right here to where I'm supposed to be, and delivering the message in the way that I deliver my message. I learned something from every aspect of my career.
Yes, absolutely. And you're right. Coaching and therapy are very different things. And you've got a broader brushstroke with coaching. Yeah. Absolutely. Even the language can be very different with coaching. Excellent.
It is very different. And, each of them have their intricacies, right? Therapy has certain techniques to get people to where they need to be. And coaching also has certain techniques that get people to where they need to be. So I like them both. They are very, very different fields. But I definitely found my space here in this coaching area.
At what stage did you decide, yes, I need to start my own company? Because people ask this all the time, are there companies that hire coaches?
There are companies that hire coaches. Absolutely. If you think about people that are in the legal profession, they have, in-house counsel, and they also have private practice counsel. And coaching is kind of the same thing, right? You can be an in-house coach, which I actually was in my corporate career. I did a lot of facilitating. I did a lot of executive coaching. I think the thing that I believe that I was always meant to be an entrepreneur. I'll put it like that. Even when I was way back when doing finance, I always felt like I had an entrepreneurial spirit and I needed to work for myself. I didn't know how to go about that path. I didn't even know what I wanted to open a business doing. I just knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And it all kind of came when I say every leap I've made in my career led me right to this moment. Everything gave me a little bit more insight and a little bit more direction to starting the business that I now have. So when I was in corporate, I facilitated a lot of workshops to get leaders ready for executive positions. I would facilitate workshops similar to the work that I do now around self-awareness and just understanding your leadership style and what type of leader you want to be, right? And throughout a lot of the work that I did in my corporate space, a lot of the tools that I would use to help the leaders and executives that I was working with, I would also do some of those things as I'm getting certified in them. So I did Strengths Finders, I did Myers-Briggs, emotional intelligence, all of the things that I am now actually certified in. I had to go through and train with those tools and work with coaches. And there were so many bells that was going off in my head. It was just like, hello, Candice, this is why this didn't feel like home for you. Hey, Candice, we're chiming the bell over here, trying to get your attention. And when that light bulb started to go off for me, all of the pieces started to come together. All of the things that I lacked clarity on, all of the things that I just didn't understand why I felt a certain type of way in a certain type of space. It all kind of pieced together for me. And then I said, you know what? I'm meant to do this work and I'm meant to do it my way. And that's why I started my own company, because even when I worked in corporate, I was coaching a certain way. I was only working with a certain level of leadership or certain level of employee. And I said, no, I want to build my own framework. I want to coach people the way that they want to be coached and not the way that this corporation is telling me I have to. If you can't tell, right? I don't like to be in boxes. And I don't like other people to be in boxes. And I want to help my clients explore who they are and where they're meant to be. And that's why I started Mahogany.
That is amazing. Tell us a bit about Mahogany coaching and consulting.
So Mahogany Coaching and Consulting, I am an Enneagram and leadership development coach. And if you don't know what the Enneagram is, it is a very similar tool to some of the other psychometrics that people take, like the Myers-Briggs, like the Strengths Finders. What's very different and unique about the Enneagram, and I call it a map of human behavior. So it's kind of like, for us older people, we understand like a hardcore paper map. And for some of the younger people, they may understand a GPS. But it is a map of human behavior. It takes you on a path to figure out how to overcome some of your core fears, your core weaknesses, and how to leverage your core motivations to navigate the world in the way that you were designed to navigate it. And so I use the Enneagram to work with both individuals and organizations to help them leverage their personality to overcome limiting beliefs and behaviors. And, all that basically means is if I go into an organization and I work with a leadership team, I help them communicate better. I help them lead better because they understand the things that are core drivers to them that are subconscious and they may not be aware of. And then the same with individuals. If they feel like something may be off, they feel like they may be stuck and they don't know why, or they keep hitting the same wall, but they don't even recognize that it's a wall there. I help them identify those types of things through leveraging their unique personality. And the one thing that's very different about the Enneagram versus other tools is other tools focus on the behaviors. They may say, well, you're an introvert, so you recharge by being alone, or you're an extrovert and you love being around people. Those are behaviors, outward facing behaviors. The Enneagram is more internal. And so it focuses on the core underlying. When you think about the iceberg diagram, where it talks about the things that are above the water and that you can see, the Enneagram are those things that's underneath the water. Those are the things that you can't see, you don't recognize until you kind of work with an Enneagram coach or even a therapist to uncover some of these things.
Never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button right now. Thank you for your support. You make this podcast possible. Now, back to the show.
Oh, that is so interesting. And it proves a point that sometimes you have to amalgamate different therapies, different approaches, different modalities. And this could work easily alongside something else.
Absolutely.
Now, as you were speaking, I was thinking about all the things you may have learned whilst you were in the army. And one of them would have been discipline, the other leadership. I mean, there's so many, positives that come out of it. What do you think you took? Because you were saying, bit by bit, you took bits and bits as you went along. What are the core or the key aspects of the Army and your training that you believe you're able to transfer into your coaching, your consultancy?
The biggest thing, and I appreciate the military so much for this thing, and it coincidentally, it didn't come from my training. It just came from the military environment. The biggest thing that I took away from my time in service is actually one of my core values, and that's open-mindedness. What I really, really gained was this worldliness that I don't believe I would have had it not been for the military. So where I grew up at, I come from an urban, but also very small. It's a very congested area in New Jersey. But we are a community of very like-minded. We all look alike, and we come from this very kind of small area. There's a lot of people who are still in that area, and they know the same people that we went to high school with, and they know the same people that, their parents worked with, and that they, and they just kind of stay in the area. And when I went to the military, I was able to not only meet people from other states, other cultures, other countries. It was just a melting pot of learning experiences for me. And it gave me this thirst for people and human behavior. And, one of the things that when I do speaking engagements, one of the things that I talk about a lot is we understand this concept of nature versus nurture. And psychologists talk all the time about nature versus nurture. And in my journey, I've learned that we focus a lot on nurture. We focus a lot on our experiences, our environments. And while there is that nature component, I don't think that we lean into that as much as there is an opportunity to lean into it. And that's what I do with the Enneagram. That's what I do when I meet with people, because there's a lot of things that I'm like, you learn this from where you grew up and the schools that you went to and your community. But what about you, like how you were born and like what things make you glow and what things make you shine? And so I like to uncover those pieces because I think we adapt to our environment very easily, which is, yes, we lean into where we're nurtured at, but I want to help people lean more into the nature. And so what I got from the military was just an inquisitiveness about human behavior and culture and people and all of the things. That was a very long answer, but I hope I gave you what you were looking for.
No, actually, yes, every bit was important there.
Yeah.
And so many things have popped into my mind. And one of the things is you were talking about the entrepreneurship and that you felt you were born to be. And now you're talking about sort of how I interpret it, the you that you bring and the you that you're bringing out of your clients. Do you call them clients? I mean,
I do. Yes. I call them clients. Yes. And it is very much about, yes, the you. It is totally about that.
Yes. And that's what you were doing when you started your consultancy, really. You were bringing
Indeed.
you, as opposed to this business, diagram, shirt and tie, I like to call it, that everybody wears, Steve Jobs sort of thing, that everybody has to be the same. And where's the you? And is there an opportunity to bring that out? So it's really nice to hear about the way you coach and the way you help people, and psychologically as well, is to find those bits of you that are underneath the surface.
Yeah. Yeah. I started my coaching business as a career coach. When I became a therapist, I went into marriage and family therapy, so systemic and relational therapy. And then I started helping people with their careers because I realized in a family dynamic, in the family environment, career tends to come up a lot. And so I started working with people in their careers. I became a certified career counselor. And then when I started with Mahogany, that was where I transitioned into first, was to help people with career fulfillment and career satisfaction based on their unique personality and how they show up in the world versus trying to fit into some corporate box or the suit and tie, as you call it, or, as you look down a vacancy announcement, you're like, do I check this box? Do I check this box? Do I check this box? I want to break people out of boxes and help them learn how to step into the world and let people know, this is who I am. This is how I can contribute. This is how I can help your organization grow. This is what I bring. I just want people to have that, this is me world, and I don't think that we express that enough. And then when I was doing the career work, I realized there's so much more to us than how we can just kind of fit into an organization. Because what I started to do was I started to tell people, let's come up with your unique value proposition. What makes you unique? And then listen, if there's not a vacancy announcement that you can marry with your unique value proposition and their vacancy announcement, honey, go out there and create one. You go out there and you find those CEOs, you find those executives, and you talk to them, you pitch yourself to them, and let them create a position for you if it's not one out there, right? And so as I was getting people to really lean into who they were and tell them to, try to go out into the world and create a position if there's not one for them, I didn't want to feel, again, boxed into just helping people with their careers, because I realized, especially as a marriage and family therapist, we have issues with our spouses, with our children. Like, there's a lot of ways that you can take what you're good at, some of your core motivations, the things that are blockers for you, like your fears and your weaknesses and all of those things. And you can use all of these things to help you communicate better. You can love better. You can be a better parent. And so I broke out of the career coaching box. And although if people come to me with help for their career, I will help them. But now I stand out in the world as an Enneagram coach, a personal growth coach, and a leadership coach. And I help people on the path that they need help on, and not the path that I think that they should get help on.
That's so empowering, but also I think people need to hear that, because family can be such an influence, whether you believe it or not. But it's bringing me to the issue of women, working with women, because as you were describing, my interpretation is being empowered by the you. Where are you? Who are you? What do you bring? Women, I think, and I know you work with men as well, but women especially do tend to struggle with, am I good enough? Am I okay? Can I walk into this space?
Yes.
What will people think if they see a woman, a Black woman, walk into this space? Mm-hmm. So why do you think you were drawn to work? Was it a conscious thing to work with women, or did you just find yourself, with lots of female clients, women clients?
Well, it was a conscious thing. I think initially, because my belief is that we can all use this type of work. We can all use the Enneagram. And I think to an extent, men could use the self-awareness piece a little bit more, like the things that, because they were just taught how to be men, right? And to not show vulnerability and to be stoic and to be the provider of the home. So they need it. But what I've learned, and yes, it was intentional for me to work with women, because they do also and it starts with childhood. It starts with our bringing, our nurture, right? We were taught to be, seen and not heard, and to be prim and proper. And, how many of us have heard that phrase, that's not ladylike, or things like that. And so, women aren't taught to be, come into a room with this resounding confidence and, sit down and be the first person to speak at the table and those types of things. We're not taught to be that way. And so, yes, a bit of it was intentional, but another piece of it is women engage more with my type of work. I find that with men, if you start to talk to them about self-awareness and personality and innate characteristics, they will either change the subject, they're not really interested in it, they won't really invest in it. So I'm still working on men. So for audience members who listen to your podcast who are men, we are trying to open the space of personal development for you, but you have to show interest. I tried to host a men's retreat and I got very, very little responses on a men's retreat. Yeah.
I would like to say, get off your tusses and signed up to these programs, men, because you need it. I know you think you don't, and I know everything's great, and maybe it is at times, but yes, you need it. If that were true, you wouldn't have so many women saying, I've got an issue with the relationship.
Indeed.
So yes, it goes both ways.
Because I'm also very spiritual. I was last summer in June, I was in Sedona, Arizona. I don't know if you've heard of Sedona. Yes. Very magical spiritual place where you can really connect with yourself, your intuition, source, And so one of the things that I received when I was in Sedona, I actually had a couple of different readings, did a couple of different workshops while I was there. And I was told that I was actually meant to help women. And I've already had my business established, before last June. And it was just, so rich and so affirming that, I was just reaffirmed that I am doing exactly what I am supposed to be doing and in the way that I'm supposed to be doing it. So it's wonderful that you said that.
To get that affirmation as well. And sometimes we just have to listen and hear, and the right person will come along to say it. But I will say, I think as we speak now today, you have a voice that's very calming, very, very easy to listen to. And so I would think that it's so nurturing for everyone, especially women, because a lot of women struggle with the kindness. I mean, I know they don't think they do, but they do. They seek out these troubled friendships and troubled relationships. So when they come to someone like you and you've got you're straightforward, but you are kind in your delivery, and probably in a way that maybe some other people may not be able to as a coach. And I think that takes you a long way. But what I will say is don't give up, and I'm not saying you have, on the men part, because you just might find that all of a sudden you get an influx.
Yeah, I haven't given up on men yet. I'm gonna continue, still working with men and still putting my message out there, and men receive it.
Receive it. Yes, please. Now, I do want to go back just a bit. You talked about personality types a bit, and this isn't personality disorder. This is more about personality types, isn't it? So can you tell us a bit more about that and how that sort of weaves through the work?
Yeah. And so the Enneagram, the system that I use, it is, and I often don't refer to it. I know a lot of people understand it to be a personality assessment the same way they understand the Myers-Briggs to be a personality assessment. I typically talk about the Enneagram as a typing system. And so when you take the assessment, you'll have a number, which is your type. So I am an Enneagram type 9. And what that type is called is it's called the peacemaker. So I laugh when I say that because of what you just said about me a moment ago. Obviously it comes through my type, but I am the peacemaker, and my core motivator is to see a world of harmony and peace. The diagram of the Enneagram, the type 9 sits right at the top. And so it's almost as if they can see all of the perspectives of all the other types that's beneath the type 9, because we're positioned right at the top. And that was one of the reasons why I became a marriage and family therapist. It's very easy for me to take perspective. It's really easy for me to, hear 2 or 3 people in a room talking, and I can synthesize what each person, where this person has their idea, person 2 has their idea, and person 3 has their idea, and they're all right. And I can sit there and say, well, wait, I think all 3 of you have a fair perspective here. And I take that data and I translate it so that the family can understand it. And so it comes natural for me to do that. And so when you're talking about personality types, or, what is natural and what comes easy for somebody, that's what the Enneagram helps us do on the high side, when we're talking about our strengths. And then on the low side, when we're talking about our barriers, the things that hold us back from getting to where we want to be or being who we want to be. And then, also our weaknesses, the Enneagram helps uncover some of those things as well, which before I became an expert in the Enneagram, I knew that I didn't like getting into a ton of conflict. Like, it makes me uncomfortable when I get into arguments, and, I'm not somebody that's going to be, I didn't become a lawyer for a reason. I didn't want to be up there arguing about something. And so once I started to get really well versed in Enneagram, I realized that that's my type. My core fear is conflict. And so Enneagram 9s, and there's a lot of complexity and there's a lot of nuance with the Enneagram. There's wings and lines of stress and all of these other things, which, I could talk for, 3 or 4 podcast episodes about the Enneagram. But overall, we're very conflict avoidant. And it shed light to me on why I navigated the world the way that I navigated world. And most of it was because I was attempting to avoid conflict. So when we talk about personality types, using this type of tool helps you understand not your personality type the way that psychology and, the field describes personality when we think about conscientiousness and all of those things. But it does talk about how you were born to navigate this world, and some of your watch outs, your ahas, and the ways that you bring your gift into the world.
Let's take a quick break from the show. And if you're enjoying today's episode of the Inquisitive Wren podcast, we'd love your support. Leaving a review, hitting that like button, and subscribing on your favorite platform not only helps us grow, but also ensures you never miss an inspiring conversation. Your comments mean the world to us. They spark new ideas, they connect us with incredible guests, and keep the energy flowing. Whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or watching on YouTube, or listening on your favorite platform, take a moment to share your thoughts and spread the word. Together, we're building a community that celebrates curiosity, growth, and transformation. Thank you for being a part of the Inquisitive Wren. Now, let's dive back into today's episode. Yes, I'm glad you've made that distinction too, because things like agreeableness and all of those personality types or areas, when we go into that, yeah, that sounds very different. And we need someone like you who knows about this, because I was thinking somebody could go online perhaps and do a little test and find they're a 9 or whatever the number, and then think they know it, but you won't really. You can read it, but you need
someone trained like you who can actually tell you what it means, why it's there, and what to do about it.
Absolutely. There's so much complexity to the Enneagram system. The woman that trained me, or the woman within the school that trained me, she's been practicing the Enneagram for 20 years and still learns things about it every day. And so it really is, a lifelong kind of exploratory thing. But yes, it does require, and you can go online. There's lots of free assessments all over the internet. For all of the different personality assessments that are out there. And the Enneagram is no different. You can go online and take an assessment. How accurate it'll be close. It may give you the correct number. It may not, but it really does require working with somebody so that you can make sense of it. That's the big thing is, so yes, I know I'm a 9 and I'm a peacemaker, but what does that mean exactly? And then having somebody that can help you understand, how does this show up in your life? Let's talk about that. When you did this thing, did you see these characteristics showing up? Right. And so you really do need somebody. It's similar to therapy, right? We may understand that we've had a trauma in our lives, but without sitting down with somebody and understanding how it impacted us, we can just say, oh, I've experienced trauma in my life. And then we may use that as our thing, right? I've experienced trauma in my life, so I've experienced trauma in my life, so I don't want to, or, and those types of things. And it's the same thing with your personality type, where you can say, well, I'm a peacemaker, so I'm a peacemaker, so I don't do these things. But it's like, no, there's more complexity to it. And we should really talk about it. Yes,
I was just thinking about zodiac signs as well. People think, okay, and I think I know there's some science behind it all, but just because you're, I don't know, Pisces, doesn't mean the person next to you is a Pisces and you'll be the same. There's complexities to it, and we need someone like you who's trained. So yes, go online, do all that, but you won't really be able to see it because you're you. You need someone outside of you who has no other vested interest in you except to help you. So we're not talking about a friend or a family member. We're talking about a therapist like yourself, a trained therapist who knows what they're talking about and has lots of case studies.
Indeed. And, even with the Enneagram, if you took the one online, it may just tell you that you're a 9 and it may tell you what your wing is, but there's 27 different subtypes. And so you and I could both be 9s, and we could be very different people, very different types of 9s based on some other things that are, based on our subtype, and then also based on, our lines of stress, our lines of release, and how we show up in the world. There's so much complexity involved in it. And so I love the tool. I think that it is great for helping people gain insights, but I do think that there is a piece of working with somebody who's trained in it to help you understand it and figure out how you navigate through the world as the particular type that you are.
Absolutely. Otherwise, it's just more information.
Indeed.
Information, that's all. Which brings me to mindset and how or why do you think we fear criticism? You were talking earlier about conflict, and many people fear conflict, but people often fear criticism as well. What is it about? Is that a part of a mindset, do you think? What is it about human beings that fear being criticized?
So I do think that it is a mindset thing. I also think, so there's a couple of reasons why I think that people fear criticism. I think that it is expectations, right? Societal expectations. And so if we are criticized, do we feel like we are an oddity, right? Do we feel like we don't fit into what society expects us to be? So that's a piece of it. It's like, humans have this nature of, it's kind of like cells and organisms, right? Like an amoeba kind of all melds together. And humans, even though we want to be individual, we also want to be like other people. We don't want to feel like we're an odd one out. And so we fear criticism because if somebody criticizes us, it's like, am I doing something bad? Right? Am I being like, I'm not good like everybody else? Am I bad? And so that's a piece of it, right? The expectations. Another piece of it, I think, is about confidence. And I do think that we throw this word confidence around all the time. If somebody, doesn't do something, we're like, oh, you just need more confidence. You're afraid to ask somebody out on a date. Oh, you just need more confidence. And all of these things. But when I think about people having confidence, I think about it from, again, that deep internal, like, knowing of yourself. I'm able to step into the world with confidence. And I have not always had this level of confidence. I was not always this person. But once I really learned about myself and I started to accept myself, that's a big piece too, self-acceptance, that builds the level of confidence that allows us to receive. We can either, it depends on if it's criticism, that's unhelpful, or if it's feedback or critique that is helpful, then I can open myself up to receive feedback and critique. But if I'm receiving criticism, it's easy for me to dismiss it because I know, what it is about me that shines. I know what it is about me that are my weaknesses and the things that I'm working through. And so I don't fear criticism, and I don't like judgment, but I don't fear it as much as maybe I used to. And so I think a lot of things kind of tie into why we fear criticism, why we fear judgment. And the more that we understand ourselves, my core belief is that self-awareness is wellness. And the more self-awareness you have, the more mental wellness, mental agility, emotional resiliency you can have, the more you understand and accept yourself.
That's really powerful as well. And we know that we can receive criticism from others, but then there is that inner critic, that self that lives continuously, not in everyone's mind. So how can people quieten that inner critic?
Yeah, quieting the inner critic. Well, our inner critic is probably worse than external chatter. We are often our own worst enemy when it comes to, you can't do this, or now's not the right time. So here's what I offer up to people. When it comes to quieting your inner critic, it is about dismantling what the inner critic is saying to you. So how do you go about doing things like that? Celebrate small, intentional wins to build momentum. So when your inner critic tells you you're not good enough to do something, I want you to reflect on all the times where you were good enough to do something. So just to use a broad brush example, let's say you want to go for an executive role and you're a manager, right? And you're like, oh, you still have director and all these other roles that you have to do. And you have to be responsible for a book of business over so much money, and you're not ready for that yet. All right, well, let's count the ways that I did succeed in moving myself to the next level, because I didn't come out of my mother's womb and out of high school into being in this manager role. I got here some way and I was great doing the things that I was doing that got me here. And so that's how you have to challenge the inner critic, because as counterintuitive as it may sound, that inner critic is a protective mechanism. We don't want to fail, like we fear failure. And so that inner critic is like, don't do that yet. Don't take risks. Don't apply for that role. Don't ask that person out for a date, because they're going to turn you down. That job is going to turn you down. You're going to fail. And so it's kind of protective to keep us small so that we don't explore this big, beautiful world that's out there for us to explore. And so you have to say, thank you. I got it. I understand that you're trying to protect me, but I got this. And then think about all the ways that you were very successful, and your inner voice will start to get quieter and your inner critic, not your inner voice, your inner critic will get quieter and quieter and quieter to the point where you can manage it.
Yes, and it takes effort, doesn't it?
It does.
You're explaining is just, I mean, how do people even become aware that that's what's happening for them?
Yeah, that's the hardest part. I think that initial awareness is the hardest part. And as a meditation teacher, I'm going to be a huge advocate for mindfulness. You have to find ways in order to silence the inner critic. You have to find ways to get more in touch with your inner voice. And you do that through, and if you're not into meditation, I know a lot of people are not into meditation. Journaling is another way of getting in touch with your inner voice. And so if you spent maybe 5 to 10 minutes a day, maybe journaling, you can start off slow. If you're new to journaling, start off with prompts. And just have some prompts. You can Google some things on the internet. Here's a prompt that I can offer up to you and your audience now. Maybe, was I perceived today the way that I intended? Right? And so start with a prompt like that and then just journal about it. And if you're not brand new to journaling and, you can just write down a stream of consciousness. Just whatever comes to mind for you. Because if you just sit and just write for 10 minutes, something's going to come out on that sheet of paper. And after a while of journaling, you can start to track patterns. And tracking those patterns is what's going to help you start to identify if you are overly critical of yourself. Because you can go back and read through the things that you're journaling about. And if it has a lot of negative self-talk, or if it has a lot of, I stopped myself from doing this thing, then you can start to develop, slowly but surely, you can start to develop awareness of like, I'm holding myself back. I am my biggest critic. I'm telling myself these things. And then you can start to silence that inner critic. But again, meditation, journaling, there's a lot of ways, but that is probably the hardest part, is identifying that that's what's happening for you and that inner critic is talking to you when you don't even realize it. Mm-hmm.
And I'm a huge advocate for meditation. I've been meditating for many years. And it is a clarity that can come through. If you can silence your mind just for a few minutes, you'll find things drift through and you listen and it's coming from you. That's your other inner, you mentioned inner voice before and you made a distinction. You said, no, not the inner voice, the inner critic.
Correct.
And I love that because they are different, but it is your voice. I have found with people as well, sometimes it's not their voice. Sometimes it's their dad, their mum, their auntie, their great grandmother or whoever they, were around long enough. But a lot of times they've carried that on into their life. So it's helpful to learn a bit more about yourself overall. But, speaking to you, Candice, I find you're very happy with your work. Is that a fair assessment? It sounds like you are in your niche. This is what you do. You do what you do. You know what you're doing. But
that's a fair assessment. Yes, I absolutely love what I'm doing right now. And it took me a while to get here. And I'm very open about my story and where I've been and how, I went through different parts of my career, which we've talked about. One of the biggest things, this is another one of my core values. I call it aha moments. Just because I'm a little different and I don't like saying lifelong learner like everybody else, I call it aha moments. But I love my own aha moments and I love seeing them for my clients. When I'm talking to them and they're just like, when that light bulb moment goes off and they just have that, like, it finally makes sense now. It's almost like that sigh of relief. If you've ever experienced that and you're just like, oh, I can breathe now. Like it makes sense. That moment, when my clients have that moment, when I have that moment, it's one of those things where like, this is why it all matters.
For the client as well, they'll be thinking about that for days and days until their next session. And that's the healing part. Mm-hmm. And there is healing that comes, I find, with the work that you're doing, because I think it's healing to spend that time on yourself, to spend that money on yourself, to carve out that space for yourself, to go and see someone like you. That is self-nurturing, and that's how you can find all those bits of you that aren't working. So that is self-care, isn't it? I know that's
It is absolutely. Yeah, which is why I say self-awareness is wellness. It's not, you don't need self-awareness because you are coming from a place of deficit. It is wellness. The more that we understand ourselves, again, I said this already, it's emotional resiliency. It is agility. It is acceptance for our vulnerability. It is all of the things, and it's such a beautiful space to be in when you love and accept the things about yourself and the things that you need to work on and the barriers that you have. Just having that self-awareness about it, it's less, you don't feel as much stress and overwhelm. You're just like, I'm working on this every day. I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm becoming a better person every day. It's so freeing and liberating. And, to your point of holding on to the voice of the people that came before us and the people who taught us. I have a course called Liberation Catalyst, and it's all about that. It's all about uncovering your limiting beliefs, figuring out whose voice is the voice that's talking and where these things came from. And the reason why I named it Liberation Catalyst is because that course is the catalyst to your liberation and you feeling free from those things that hold you back and limit you.
Yes, and many things can. Mm-hmm. So if you could give our listeners, let's say, 3 tips to personal happiness, just kind of inching towards it, what 3 things come to mind for you that people can start to look at and do?
Yeah, the first one I would say is, let's reframe how we think about failure. That's the first thing that I would say. Redefine failure. And this is a common sentiment. I've heard people say failure is feedback, but to think about it, it's data, it's information. So let's not think about failure as a bad word. It's like people say that word failure and they cringe up. Let's think about it from the perspective of its data. So that's the first tip that I would give. Let's redefine how we think about failure. The second thing, and I talked about this already, is self-awareness is foundational for growth. And I just encourage people to see it as self-care, as wellness, versus saying, I'm deficient in some area and, I need to increase my self-awareness. It sounds so yucky that way, right? Let's think about it as a foundation for growth. And you can start anywhere you are. You can start with journaling. You can start with meditation. One of the easiest ways to start building your self-awareness on your growth journey is simply having a gratitude practice. Just having a gratitude practice and just being able to appreciate everything. It doesn't have to be big things. It can be very, very small things, right? When you get out of the shower in the morning and you have a nice soft towel, just be appreciative of the hands that went into producing that towel. Even the job that you have that provided you the ability to go out and get that towel. And so just practicing gratitude can also help people on a growth journey. And then the third tip that I would say is start getting familiar with overcoming autopilot reactions. This is talking about the emotional reactivity that we often have. It's human nature to be reactive. This one is a little bit more complex than the first 2, but I will say if you start a meditation practice and you start to understand maybe somatic things, if I feel tension in my shoulders, or maybe I feel something in the pit of my stomach, maybe, an emotion is tied to this, right? Start to identify the emotions that you're feeling when you're feeling it, And then we can get to a point where we can overcome autopilot reactions. So those are 3 things that I think could help anybody on a growth journey, a self-awareness journey, and just, being the best versions of ourselves, which I think is all we all want to do, is just to be the best versions of ourselves.
Excellent advice. And really 3 tips that people can start now. You can start immediately on those things. So this is really helpful. And I know we only have a minute left, but I wanted to just get philosophical for a second. Quick question about, us being on this earth plane right now, here in the here and now. If you could go back to any particular time that you could think of, and I know people say, oh, I never want to go back, I want to move forward. But if you just, could go back to a decade or time in life, does anything pop up for you?
So I laugh when you said it, because I'm like, no, I don't want to go back. I just want to go forward. But here's what I will say from a philosophical perspective and a spirituality perspective, actually, because we talked a little bit about Sedona earlier. One of the things that I learned when I was in Sedona is that in my previous life, I was a medicine woman. And so if I could go back, not necessarily in this time, like a decade or 2 decades, if I could go back and see myself in my previous life, I think I was always meant to be a healer. I was told that I was a medicine woman in a former life. So I'd love to see, my soul as a medicine woman in my previous life. I think that just, I think it would be cool to be able to do that.
Something just told me to ask that question. And you're right. You are a healer. It was evident from the moment you opened your mouth. You've got a healing voice for a start. And yes, you've got your niche. This is it. Not to say you won't do other things, because you probably will eventually too. But yeah, this is amazing. Candice, this has been an eye-opener. It's really nice to learn about a different way to look at the human mind and the human being and us just being on this earth plane. So thank you for joining me today. And guys, all the links to the website and everything. Now, do you have anything coming up? You mentioned a course that you've got already, but anything coming up that we need to be aware of at this time?
So I do have my course, Liberation Catalyst, which helps people overcome limiting beliefs. And the other thing is my Path to Clarity, and that's my Enneagram coaching. So if you have any questions about either of those programs, or just want to reach out and talk about things from a philosophical perspective, you can find all of my contact information in the show notes. It's been a pleasure having this conversation with you, Sha. I really appreciate it.
Oh, I appreciate it. And go and follow Candice on all her social media. It'll all be in the links in the show notes. I know you're an advocate for mental health as well, just making sure that people get the tools that they need to keep mental health. So thank you for being an advocate for mental health, mental awareness, personal growth, and, permanent change for people. Thank you for the work you're doing.
Yes, thank you so much.
Looking for an escape to nature? Ready to embrace wellness? From yoga and detox spa retreats to awakening journeys and corporate team building, let Muse Flower Retreat and Spa be your muse. Whether you seek relaxation, transformation, or a space to hold your own retreat, Muse Flower is here for you. Nestled in peaceful Chiang Rai, Thailand, Muse Flower Retreat and Spa is an all-inclusive sanctuary for healing, learning, and natural living, offering yoga, meditation, wellness, or simply a mindful green space to recharge. You are welcomed. Immerse yourself in holistic retreats and workshops designed to awaken your creative energy. Enjoy organic vegetarian cuisine, spa therapies, and creative workshops, all in a tranquil, eco-conscious setting. Founded by wellness expert Tanya Ho, Museflower Retreat and Spa is designed to nurture creativity and well-being. You don't have to be a yogi to feel at home here. Come as you are. Wellness never felt so good. Book your retreat today at Museflower Retreat and Spa and use code WREN10, that's WREN 10, to get £10 off your first booking. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Inquisitive Wren podcast. I hope you found it insightful. If you did, I'd love for you to share it with a friend who might enjoy it too. Don't forget to share it on social media. It really helps us reach more people who resonate with our content. If you haven't already, make sure to follow the show. It's the best way to stay connected and help our Inquisitive Wren community grow. I'd also love to hear from you. Leave a rating and a review to let me know your thoughts, and be sure to follow so you never miss the latest episodes or behind the scenes content from the Inquisitive Wren. Thanks again, and as always, stay curious.